She was the reluctant star of the first state event ever to be filmed. BBC One tells the story of Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 15 minutes. That's after the main evening news from the BBC with Peter Sissons.
World leaders warn China not to do away with democracy when it takes control of Hong Kong at the end of the month. At the Denver summit, Tony Blair says world opinion will condemn China if it breaks its agreement with Britain. The first disputed parade of Northern Ireland's marching season passes off peacefully. And Britain's men stage a triumphant comeback in Munich to win athletics' European Cup. Good evening. World leaders have warned China not to stifle human rights in Hong Kong when it takes over the colony from Britain on July the 1st. Tony Blair won their backing at the Denver Economic Summit when they pledged to hold China to its commitment to hold free elections within 12 months. From Denver, our diplomatic correspondent Brian Hanrahan reports.
Thank you. Please be seated.
In their final declaration, the summit leaders linked Hong Kong's civil liberties with its future business success and called on China to respect both. Britain believes it's the perfect platform to maintain international pressure on China. The summit's conclusions were presented by its chairman, President Clinton.
Next week will represent an historic moment as Hong Kong returns to Chinese sovereignty. We reaffirmed our strong interest in Hong Kong's future and our shared conviction on the importance of China's adherence to its commitments under the 1984 agreement. We appreciate in particular the devotion that Prime Minister Blair and his government attached to this endeavor.
Mr. Blair had begun his day at the local Catholic church. As a new face with a new style, he's been the centre of great public interest.
Have you not found it too much of a circus for everyone in town? Be honest now.
Public curiosity offered him a place on network television, where he talked of Britain's aim of internationalising the Hong Kong issue without antagonising China.
For people in Hong Kong, and I should say to you, I mean, my sister-in-law is Hong Kong Chinese. I have family in Hong Kong. There are 3.5 million British overseas passport holders in Hong Kong. I know Hong Kong well. We have a deep moral responsibility to Hong Kong that we will discharge. But the best way to discharge it is to keep China to the joint declaration and make sure we do build international support to do that. And secondly, to make sure that Britain has a stable and good relationship with China, because in the end, that gives the best prospect for people in Hong Kong of a safe and stable future.
The summit's big decisions were to try to create new jobs and to help African development. Its big failure was the environment, where America resisted European pressure to cut back its emissions of greenhouse gases. But the deadlock here was just the opening of a major international argument, which will continue through the year ahead.
I'm sorry to say that the American population does not yet appear to have grasped in the way that the European populations have just how serious is the risk to the planet and the fact that we actually can't continue with our present lifestyles if we want our grandchildren to have any comfortable lifestyle at all.
These summits are still something of a ragbag of worthy issues, but the participants say the platitudes of the past are starting to give way to more concrete action. That's partly because unresolved problems are knocked on from one year to the next, and partly because now President Yeltsin has brought Russia inside the group, any decision is more likely to have a real effect. Brian Hanrahan, BBC News, Denver.
Tony Blair has also been speaking in Denver about Northern Ireland. He described how a heartfelt letter from a young girl bolstered his resolve to seek peace. In the province itself, an Orange Order march of around 200 loyalists passed through the largely nationalist village of Bellaghy without trouble. The police had feared there could be violent clashes with local Catholics who were demonstrating against the march. Our Ireland correspondent Mark Devonport reports.
Northern Ireland has featured strongly in the talks Tony Blair's been having on the margins of the Denver summit. He's been grateful for the support he's already received from President Clinton. Today, he was using the US TV networks to impress his concerns on ordinary Americans.
I got a letter from a little girl just a couple of days ago who just said to me, do whatever you can for peace in Northern Ireland. I've only had 1 year of peace in my life.
Nationalist residents took to the streets of Ballachy in County Derry today to express their opposition to an Orange Order parade through the village. With the controversial Drum Cree parade in Portadown only 2 weeks away, the American charged with chairing the province's political talks stressed the importance of avoiding confrontation over marches if the peace process is to survive.
First, I think the marching season must pass without the kind of violent incidents and widespread rioting that occurred last year. And second, there has to be some tangible progress at the talks themselves.
In Ballachy, the police turned out in force to keep the Catholic protesters away from the Protestant marchers. Although there were complaints about the scale of the security operation, the tactics appeared to work. The Orangemen marched up to police lines and read out a letter of protest about not being allowed to walk the whole of their planned route. Then they turned and marched away. There was no trouble here or at 2 other disputed parades elsewhere.
We have progressed as far as we can today to make our point that we do not want trouble, but at the same time we want our cultural rights. And the fact is that because I don't want to fight doesn't mean to say that I can't. Here, here, Bobby. Here.
The security forces will be relieved that today's parades passed off peacefully, but both politicians and police know that there will be far more difficult tests to come before the summer's marching season is over. Mark Devonport, BBC News, Ballachy.
The Home Office is to investigate reports that women and children who've been victims of assaults and other offences are still being intimidated by prisoners from jail. Phone calls and threatening letters are being sent, and in some cases assaults have been planned from inside prison. Jackie Rowley reports.
Victims of stalkers and violent men expect their ordeal to end with a prison sentence for the offender. But new evidence suggests that isn't the case. At least 100 women are still being terrorised from behind bars.
I am now convinced that there are scores and scores, if not hundreds, of men who have continued to harass their victim, be it a woman, a child or their family, by making phone calls, by sending unwanted letters, or even in extreme cases of getting another prisoner when they've been closed down to contact that victim.
Last month, Full Sutton top security jail near York installed a new system to block prisoners from telephoning specific numbers after it emerged inmates had been ringing their victims. Other prisons censor mail and monitor calls, but only randomly or after specific complaints. And even that won't stop the most determined prisoners.
One of the most serious attempts to threaten a victim when I was aware that the convicted perpetrator asked prisoners being released who he knew to go to his ex-girlfriend's house to warn her that if she was thinking of starting a new relationship that they would be watching her and that there would be retribution. So a very overt threat of violence, very terrifying.
The prison service doesn't keep a central register of complaints, so there are no official figures. But psychologists point out that with such crimes, victims are often too frightened to report what's happening to them anyway. The new Prisons Minister, Joyce Quinn, is particularly concerned about stalkers and the sexual harassment of victims. She says she'll raise this at the earliest opportunity with the police, the probation and the prison service. Jackie Rowley, BBC News, at the Home Office.
The Agriculture Minister Jack Cunningham has admitted it could be a year or more before the European Union lifts its export ban on British beef. The complexity of the negotiations made it impossible for a date to be set, he said, but the ban would probably be lifted in a piecemeal way. A large-scale search has failed to find any trace of 2 people who jumped from the Tamar Bridge in Cornwall. Coast Guards say it's doubtful the pair could have survived what's thought to have been a stunt that went wrong. The visiting Australian Prime Minister John Howard has confirmed that Australia is buying 33 Hawk jets worth more than £400 million from British Aerospace. The contract should help secure jobs at factories in Warton in Lancashire and at Brough on Humberside. Athletics, the British men's team has won the European Cup for the second time ever in Munich. Linford Christie, the team captain, was making his last appearance in a British vest. The women's team achieved their best ever result by finishing 3rd.
A successful second day for the British men's team started with Jonathan Edwards. The world record triple jumper won with a leap of 17 metres 74, the best in the world this year. Steve Backley kept up the momentum in the javelin. His first throw proved enough to win the event with more than a metre to spare. There was encouragement too for Britain's women's team. Kelly Holmes dominated a strong 1500 metres field to win in comfort. And there was unexpected success. The performance of the day came from Robert Hoff, hardly a household name, but now the first Briton to win the 3000 metre steeplechase at the European Cup.
To be honest, I didn't really expect to win it. Obviously you go in with the attitude that you're going to do your best, but I'm quite surprised myself there.
By comparison, Linford Christie has won 13 individual titles at the European Cup, but this, he has insisted, was his last appearance in a British vest. The finish in the 200 couldn't have been closer. A dead heat, the decision. Delight for the team captain, but no change of mind.
There's no definitely maybe. No, this is it. I've got to stop sometimes, and if we win the cup, it'd be a nice high. Maybe God has answered my prayers, and hopefully everything will go well, and we'll hold the cup up for another time.
Win the cup they did, with the 400 metre relay side providing another emphatic victory. Quite a way for Christie to sign off. James Helm, BBC News.
Australia's cricketers will have a lead of 136 at the start of the final day of the second test against England at Lord's. After most of the fourth day's play had been wiped out by rain, Australia added 82 runs to their overnight total. At the close, they were 213 for 7.
Plenty of time for Michael Atherton and his teammates to ponder England's perilous position as heavy rain kept the players off Lords' soggy turf until 20-6 this evening. When the Australian batsmen were finally given the chance to add to their overnight lead, there was no point hanging around, and Matthew Elliott made sure that a suitable pace was maintained. Although his colleagues found a fired-up England attack rather harder to handle. Mark Waugh hitting the ball into the hands of Devon Malcolm, and before the score had moved on, Shane Warne departing in similar fashion, caught by Nasser Hussain. And then Steve Waugh falling first ball to Caddick. Wickets, though, were of no great concern to Australia. Quick runs were all that mattered, and they were still flowing freely from the bat of Elliott. A single brought up his maiden Test century on his first Test appearance at Lord's, and although he was finally out for 112 shortly before the close, it played a vital role in building up an Australian lead that, weather permitting, will put pressure on England's batsmen tomorrow. James Pearce, BBC News.
The defeated candidate for the Tory leadership, Kenneth Clark, has been offered a job with his favourite football team at Nottingham Forest. The former Chancellor, a lifelong fan of the club, has been asked to help manage its business interests and prepare Forest for a stock market flotation. Wesley Kerr reports.
Nottingham Forest were relegated the same weekend. Their most famous supporter lost the keys to number 11. The club's new owners think he has the perfect off-ball skills to chair the financial side of the company when it floats on the stock market this autumn.
Who better to be chairman of the PLC than the former Chancellor of the Exchequer? And not only that, of course, he is a Forest supporter, so whether he would have any involvement in the football side of things, I'm not quite sure.
Mr. Clark was informally offered the post before the election and before his defeat in the Tory leadership contest. He's not especially wealthy, and loss of office has cut his salary. Other clubs with big fan bases have done well on the stock market. Although the glory days for Forest are a memory, flotation would boost the club's wallet and help it compete for top players. Kenneth Clark's been a Forest fan since boyhood, with grounds in his constituency. Discussions on the job offer are still at an early stage. Wesley Kerr, BBC News.
And tonight's main news again. World leaders have warned China not to do away with democracy when it takes control of Hong Kong at the end of the month. At the Denver summit, Tony Blair said world opinion would condemn China if it broke its agreement with Britain. That's all from the BBC Newsroom tonight. Good night.
Who do you think these people are referring to?
He's been robbing them of all this money. I don't know how he could do it.
Because it's theft from the state. I think he was treated extraordinarily leniently.
He can't have a conscience.
Would it surprise you to know that they're talking of certain doctors and chemists, people you place your trust in, and that their actions have cheated you, the taxpayer, out of millions of pounds?
We could buy approximately 300 hip replacements with that sort of money.
Panorama reveals the prescription fraudsters tomorrow night at 10 on BBC One.
Good evening. There's certainly been a lot of weather around today with hail, thunder, even a tornado. There's today's chart, there's Thursday's chart, so we're in for a repeat performance in the half of the week. All the showers running down mostly central and eastern parts of the country, and as I said a while ago, some of them have been pretty heavy. We still have some heavy ones rumbling around in the Midlands, but they're going to be fading away now, and I think by the end of the night, as this weather system drifts across into the North Sea, so we're just going to be left with, by that time, mostly light outbreaks of rain in eastern parts of the country, and generally dry weather in the west, and lowest temperatures 8 to 11 degrees. Tomorrow starts off with quite a lot of cloud, and we're still going to have some outbreaks of rain in these eastern counties of England. I think the clouds should break, though, during the course of the day. Most places will get some sunshine coming through, although the west and north of Scotland staying fairly cloudy. Again, though, we'll have some showers popping up, just one or two lightish ones in the west, rather more in the east, but I don't think anything like the sort of showers that we had today. Temperatures a little bit higher, too, although it's still going to be cool in the breeze on the east coast.